The first light of dawn brought no comfort to Jake and his team. The alien sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting long shadows across their dead camp. The ruins still glowed with that strange blue light, and the humming continued like a distant engine. Jake stood up from where he had been sitting all night. His back ached from staying alert, watching for any sign of danger. The others looked just as tired and worried. "Check the equipment again," he told Tony. Tony moved to the communications station and tried every switch and button. Nothing worked. The screen stayed dark and silent. "Still dead, Commander," Tony reported. "Whatever is affecting our gear, it's getting stronger." Lisa was already walking toward the ruins with her notebook and a simple measuring tool. Jake quickly caught up with her. "Don't go alone," he said. "I need to document what's happening," Lisa replied. "Look at this." She pointed to the ground near the main structure. Fresh symbols had appeared overnight, carved deep into the stone surface. But these weren't like the ancient markings they had been studying. These symbols mixed familiar human mathematical concepts with the alien script. "How is this possible?" Jake asked. "I don't know. But whoever did this understands our mathematics. See this symbol here? It's clearly representing pi, and this one is the square root sign we use." Kate joined them, her rifle ready. "Commander, I don't like this. Something knows about us. Something knows about human math and science." Jake felt the same unease, but they needed answers. "We're going deeper into the ruins, all of us together. Nobody stays behind." The team moved carefully through the ancient corridors. The walls were covered with both old and new symbols. Some passages glowed brighter than others, as if something was guiding them toward a specific location. "This is definitely a path," Ben observed. "The lights are leading us somewhere." After 20 minutes of walking, they reached a large circular chamber they had never seen before. The room was empty except for a raised platform in the center. As soon as Jake stepped onto the platform, the world around him changed. His vision filled with images that weren't his own. He saw Earth from space, then other planets with different civilizations. Millions of worlds flashed through his mind, each one populated by different species. Some were familiar, creatures that looked almost human. Others were completely alien. But in every image, Jake saw the same thing happening. The civilizations grew and spread to other worlds. They built great cities and amazing technologies. Then something would test them, and they would fail. Their expansion would stop, and they would be trapped on their home worlds forever. The images stopped suddenly, and Jake found himself back in the chamber. But he wasn't alone. A figure stood before him, tall and thin with pale blue skin. Its eyes were large and completely black. When it spoke, Jake heard the words inside his head rather than through his ears. "You are the representative of the species, called humans," the being said. Jake's team couldn't see or hear the creature. They were looking around the chamber in confusion, calling his name, but Jake could barely hear them. All his attention was focused on the alien being. "What do you want?" Jake managed to ask. "We are the Watchers. We have observed your species since you first sent signals into space. Now you have reached other worlds. It is time for evaluation." More images flowed into Jake's mind. He saw human colonies on different planets, human ships traveling between the stars. But in every image, the same thing was happening that had happened to his team. All technology was failing. All communication was cut. "You're doing this to all human colonies," Jake realized. "The test has begun. Your species must prove it deserves to expand among the stars. Many before you have failed this test. What kind of test? The Watcher showed Jake more images. He saw the 5 members of his team in different scenarios, each facing impossible challenges. Kate was fighting to defend a city. Ben was treating sick aliens in a hospital. Lisa was working frantically with complex mathematics. Tony was trying to maintain communications across vast distances. Each human will face a trial that tests the core of your species' nature: courage, compassion, wisdom, determination, and sacrifice. If any fail, your species will be confined to Earth forever. Jake felt panic rising in his chest. That's not fair. You can't judge all of humanity based on 5 people. Every species sends representatives when they reach this stage of development. You 5 have been chosen because your actions brought you here first. The chamber around Jake began to change. The walls showed images of other species that had been tested. Most of the images ended the same way, with the species trapped on their home world while the Watchers moved on to observe the next civilization. How? Many species have passed your test? Jake asked. The Watcher was quiet for a long moment. None have passed completely. Some have shown promise in individual trials, but none have succeeded at the final test. What is the final test? You will learn when the time comes, but first your team must complete their individual trials. The images in Jake's mind shifted again. He saw his teammates, but they appeared to be dying or already dead. Kate was lying motionless on a battlefield. Ben was collapsed over his medical equipment. Lisa was surrounded by failed calculations. Tony was screaming into a dead communication system. "No!" Jake shouted out loud. His team heard him this time and rushed to where he was standing on the platform, but they couldn't see the Watcher or hear what it was saying. "Jake, what's wrong?" Lisa asked, grabbing his arm. "The trials are beginning." "Now," the Watcher continued, "each of your teammates will experience their test. They will believe the others have failed and died. You will experience fragments of their trials and will believe they are failing." "This is torture," Jake said. "This is evaluation. If your species cannot handle the pressure of believing their companions are lost, how can they handle the pressures of galactic civilization?" The Watcher began to fade from Jake's vision. "The trials will last as long as they must. Some species complete them in hours. Others take years. A few take decades before they finally fail." "Wait," Jake called out. "Tell me more about the species that showed promise. What did they do right?" "They worked alone and thought only of themselves. They used logic and technology to solve problems. They followed our rules exactly as we gave them." Jake felt a spark of hope. "And they still failed?" "Yes. In the end, they all failed the final test because they could not make the ultimate sacrifice. For their species," the Watcher's voice was growing fainter. "Your trials begin now, Jake Morrison. Try not to disappoint us like the others did." The vision ended, and Jake was back in the chamber with his team. They were all staring at him with worry and confusion. "Commander, you were talking to yourself," Ben said. "Are you feeling all right?" Before Jake could answer, the chamber began to change around them. Walls appeared where none had existed before, separating each team member into individual spaces. Jake tried to reach for Lisa, but she was already fading from view. "Stay together!" he shouted, but it was too late. Each of his teammates disappeared into their own trial, leaving Jake alone in the empty chamber. The Watcher's words echoed in his mind. "Try not to disappoint us like the others did." Jake looked around the empty space and realized he was facing his own test now. But unlike the other species, he wasn't planning to follow the Watcher's rules exactly as they had been given. The first light of dawn brought no comfort to Jake and his team. The alien sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting long shadows across their dead camp. The ruins still glowed with that strange blue light, and the humming continued like a distant engine. Jake stood up from where he had been sitting all night. His back ached from staying alert, watching for any sign of danger. The others looked just as tired and worried. "Check the equipment again," he told Tony. Tony moved to the communication station and tried every switch and button. Nothing worked. The screen stayed dark and silent. "Still dead, Commander," Tony reported. "Whatever is affecting our gear, it's getting stronger." Lisa was already walking toward the ruins with her notebook and a simple measuring tool. Jake quickly caught up with her. "Don't go alone," he said. "I need to document what's happening," Lisa replied. "Look at this." She pointed to the ground near the main structure. Fresh symbols had appeared overnight, carved deep into the stone surface. But these weren't like the ancient markings they had been studying. These symbols mixed familiar human mathematical concepts with the alien script. "How is this possible?" Jake asked. "I don't know, but whoever did this understands our mathematics. See this symbol here? It's clearly representing pi, and this one is the square root sign we use." Kate joined them, her rifle ready. "Commander, I don't like this. Something knows about us. Something knows about human math and science." Jake felt the same unease, but they needed answers. "We're going deeper into the ruins. All of us together. Nobody stays behind." The team moved carefully through the ancient corridors. The walls were covered with both old and new symbols. Some passages glowed brighter than others, as if something was guiding them toward a specific location. "This is definitely a path," Ben observed. "The lights are leading us somewhere." After 20 minutes of walking, they reached a large circular chamber they had never seen before. The room was empty except for a raised platform in the center. As soon as Jake stepped onto the platform, the world around him changed. His vision filled with images that weren't his own. He saw Earth from space, then other planets with different civilizations. Millions of worlds flashed through his mind, each one populated by different species. Some were familiar, creatures that looked almost human. Others were completely alien. But in every image, Jake saw the same thing happening. The civilizations grew and spread to other worlds. They built great cities and amazing technologies. Then something would test them, and they would fail. Their expansion would stop, and they would be trapped on their homeworlds forever. The images stopped suddenly, and Jake found himself back in the chamber. But he wasn't alone. A figure stood before him, tall and thin with pale blue skin. Its eyes were large and completely black. When it spoke, Jake heard the words inside his head rather than through his ears. "You are the representative of the species, called humans," the being said. Jake's team couldn't see or hear the creature. They were looking around the chamber in confusion, calling his name, but Jake could barely hear them. All his attention was focused on the alien being. "What do you want?" Jake managed to ask. "We are the Watchers. We have observed your species since you first sent signals into space. Now you have reached other worlds. It is time for evaluation." More images flowed into Jake's mind. He saw human colonies on different planets, human ships traveling between the stars. But in every image, the same thing was happening that had happened to his team. All technology was failing. All communication was cut. "You're doing this to all human colonies," Jake realized. "The test has begun. Your species must prove it deserves to expand among the stars. Many before you have failed this test. What kind of test? The Watcher showed Jake more images. He saw the 5 members of his team in different scenarios, each facing impossible challenges. Kate was fighting to defend a city. Ben was treating sick aliens in a hospital. Lisa was working frantically with complex mathematics. Tony was trying to maintain communications across vast distances. Each human will face a trial that tests the core of your species' nature: courage, compassion, wisdom, determination, and sacrifice. If any fail, your species will be confined to Earth forever. Jake felt panic rising in his chest. That's not fair. You can't judge all of humanity based on 5 people. Every species sends representatives when they reach this stage of development. You 5 have been chosen because your actions brought you here first. The chamber around Jake began to change. The walls showed images of other species that had been tested. Most of the images ended the same way, with the species trapped on their home world while the Watchers moved on to observe the next civilization. How many species have passed your test? Jake asked. The Watcher was quiet for a long moment. None have passed completely. Some have shown promise in individual trials, but none have succeeded at the final test. What is the final test? You will learn when the time comes. But first, your team must complete their individual trials. The images in Jake's mind shifted again. He saw his teammates, but they appeared to be dying or already dead. Kate was lying motionless on a battlefield. Ben was collapsed over his medical equipment. Lisa was surrounded by failed calculations. Tony was screaming into a dead communication system. "No!" Jake shouted out loud. His team heard him this time and rushed to where he was standing on the platform. But they couldn't see the Watcher or hear what it was saying. "Jake, what's wrong?" Lisa asked, grabbing his arm. "The trials are beginning now," the Watcher continued. "Each of your teammates will experience their test. They will believe the others have failed and died. You will experience fragments of their trials and will believe they are failing." "This is torture," Jake said. "This is evaluation. If your species cannot handle the pressure of believing their companions are lost, how can they handle the pressures of galactic civilization?" The Watcher began to fade from Jake's vision. "The trials will last as long as they must. Some species complete them in hours. Others take years. A few take decades before they finally fail." "Wait," Jake called out. "Tell me more about the species that showed promise. What did they do right?" "They worked alone and thought only of themselves. They used logic and technology to solve problems. They followed our rules exactly as we gave them." Jake felt a spark of hope. "And they still failed?" "Yes. In the end, they all failed the final test because they could not make the ultimate sacrifice for their species." The Watcher's voice was growing fainter. "Your trials begin now, Jake Morrison. Try not to disappoint us like the others did." The vision ended and Jake was back in the chamber with his team. They were all staring at him with worry and confusion. "Commander, you were talking to yourself," Ben said. "Are you feeling all right?" Before Jake could answer, the chamber began to change around them. Walls appeared where none had existed before, separating each team member into individual spaces. Jake tried to reach for Lisa, but she was already fading from view. "Stay together," he shouted, but it was too late. Each of his teammates disappeared into their own trial, leaving Jake alone. In the empty chamber, the Watcher's words echoed in his mind. "Try not to disappoint us like the others did." Jake looked around the empty space and realized he was facing his own test now. But unlike the other species, He wasn't planning to follow the Watcher's rules, exactly as they had been given. The first light of dawn brought no comfort to Jake and his team. The alien sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting long shadows across their dead camp. The ruins still glowed with that strange blue light, and the humming continued like a distant engine. Jake stood up from where he had been sitting all night. His back ached from staying alert, watching for any sign of danger. The others looked just as tired and worried. "Check the equipment again," he told Tony. Tony moved to the communications station and tried every switch and button. Nothing worked. The screen stayed dark and silent. "Still dead, Commander," Tony reported. "Whatever is affecting our gear, it's getting stronger." Lisa was already walking toward the ruins with her notebook and a simple measuring tool. Jake quickly caught up with her. "Don't go alone," he said. "I need to document what's happening," Lisa replied. "Look at this." She pointed to the ground near the main structure. Fresh symbols had appeared overnight, carved deep into the stone surface. But these weren't like the ancient markings they had been studying. These symbols mixed familiar human mathematical concepts with the alien script. "How is this possible?" Jake asked. "I don't know, but whoever did this understands our mathematics. See this symbol here? It's clearly representing pi, and this one is the square root sign we use." Kate joined them, her rifle ready. "Commander, I don't like this. Something knows about us. Something knows about human math and science." Jake felt the same unease, but they needed answers. "We're going deeper into the ruins, all of us together. Nobody stays behind." The team moved carefully through the ancient corridors. The walls were covered with both old and new symbols. Some passages glowed brighter than others, as if something was guiding them toward a specific location. "This is definitely a path," Ben observed. "The lights are leading us somewhere." After 20 minutes of walking, they reached a large circular chamber they had never seen before. The room was empty except for a raised platform in the center. As soon as Lisa's fingers moved quickly across the alien mathematics, but now she was thinking differently. Jake's voice had been faint, maybe just her imagination, but it reminded her that she wasn't really alone. Even separated by the Watcher's trials, she was still part of a human team. The entropy wave problem began to look different through human eyes. Every other species had tried to create perfect mathematical solutions, elegant equations that would restore order to chaos. But Lisa remembered her art classes from college, her music lessons as a child, even the way human emotions could create beauty from disorder. "What if the wave isn't meant to be stopped?" she said to herself. "What if it's meant to be guided?" She started writing equations that included randomness as a positive force. She added variables for creativity, for the unexpected, for the kind of beautiful accidents that humans experienced in art and music. The mathematics looked messy and chaotic to any logical observer, but Lisa could see the patterns hidden inside the disorder. In another part of the trial dimension, Tony Rodriguez found himself at the center of a galaxy-wide communication network that was falling apart piece by piece. Entire sectors were going dark as some kind of interference spread across space. "Engineer Rodriguez," an alien technician called out. "We're losing contact with 17 more systems. The interference is spreading faster than we can compensate." Tony looked at the massive displays showing communication links across thousands of worlds. Red lights indicated failed connections, and there were far too many red lights. "What's causing the interference?" Tony asked. "Unknown. It appears to be some kind of natural phenomenon, but it's unlike anything we've encountered before." Tony began working with the alien technology, but he quickly realized it was too rigid. The aliens had built their communication system using pure logic. Every connection followed the most efficient path. Every signal used the most logical frequency. That's the problem, Tony muttered. You're too predictable. He started making changes that seemed crazy to the alien technicians. Instead of using the most logical paths, he created seemingly random routes for the signals. He mixed different communication methods together in ways that shouldn't work. He even started using what looked like interference as part of the signal itself. Engineer Rodriguez, these changes make no sense, the alien technician protested. You're adding chaos to a system that needs order. Sometimes chaos is exactly what you need, Tony replied. Humans learned a long time ago that the best way to get through interference is to expect it and work with it, not against it. Slowly, the communication network began to stabilize. The random routes Tony had created were harder for the interference to predict and block. The mixed signals were stronger because they supported each other instead of competing. But Tony was exhausted from the mental effort. He slumped over his workstation and whispered, "Jake, I hope you can hear this. I think I'm figuring out how to beat their system." Back in Kate's trial, the battle for the colony was reaching its climax. Her soldiers had held the walls far longer than should have been possible, but they were down to their last ammunition and their last defensive positions. "Commander, we've bought them as much time as we can," the lieutenant said. "The evacuation. Ships are almost finished loading the civilians." Kate looked out at the alien forces preparing for their final assault. Her soldiers were brave, but they were also human. They were scared, tired, and facing certain death. "I need to tell you all something," Kate called out to her remaining troops. "I don't know if we're going to survive this, but I know that every person we've saved today will remember what we did here. And their children will remember. And their children's children." She stood up on the wall, making herself a target for the alien weapons. "Humans don't just fight for ourselves. We fight for the future. We fight for people we've never met and never will meet. That's what makes us different." The aliens began their final charge, but Kate's soldiers didn't break. They fought with the desperate courage of humans protecting their families. They fought like people who believed their sacrifice mattered. As laser fire filled the air around her, Kate heard something impossible, Jake's voice calling her name. It gave her strength for one final rally. In the medical facility, Ben was facing his hardest decision yet. The disease was spreading faster than they could treat it, and supplies were almost gone. He had to choose which patients would receive the last doses of medicine. The alien doctors were urging him to save the humans first. "It is only natural," they insisted. "Every species protects its own." But Ben looked around at all the different aliens who were suffering and dying. Children, parents, elderly beings who had lived long lives, and young ones who had barely started. They were all different species, but they were all people. "No," Ben said firmly. "I'm not choosing based on species. I'm choosing based on who needs help the most." He began triaging patients not by their race or species, but by medical need. A human child and an alien adult both needed the same medicine, so he treated the one who was sicker first. The alien doctors watched in amazement as Ben worked to save everyone, regardless of what they looked like or where they came from. "Your species is unusual," one of them said. "Yeah," Ben replied, working on a patient that looked like a giant spider. "We're pretty proud of that." Jake could feel his teammates' progress through brief mental flashes. They were succeeding at their trials, but not in the way the Watchers expected. They weren't excelling as individuals using pure logic. They were succeeding as humans, using creativity, emotion, and their connections to each other. The Watcher appeared before Jake again. Your species is different from the others we have tested. How so? Jake asked. The others focused on personal achievement. They tried to win their trials through superior logic and technology. Your team is succeeding through cooperation, even though they are isolated from each other? That's because you don't really understand what makes humans human, Jake said. We're not just individuals. We're part of something bigger. Even when we're separated, we carry our connections with us. This is not logical, the Watcher said. Logic isn't everything. Sometimes the best solutions come from the heart, not the brain. The Watcher showed Jake images of other species that had been tested. They all failed because they could not make the ultimate sacrifice when the time came. They would not give up their individual lives for their species' future. What is the ultimate sacrifice? Jake asked. You will learn soon. Your teammates are completing their trials. The final test will begin shortly. Jake felt a moment of pride. His team had succeeded where countless other species had failed. But he also felt fear. If the final test had defeated every other species, what chance did humans really have? Tell me about the species that came closest to passing, Jake said. The Zephyrians came very close. They were logical, efficient, and disciplined. But when their representative faced the final choice, he chose personal survival over species advancement. What choice did he face? The same choice you will face. To ensure your species passes the test and gains freedom to explore the galaxy, one representative must remain here forever as a guardian of the testing facility. Cut off from home, from family, from their own kind. Jake felt his stomach drop. And no one has ever made that sacrifice? Many have tried. But when faced with eternal isolation, they all chose to return home and accept failure for their species. The chamber around Jake began to change again. He could sense that his teammates were finishing their individual trials. Soon they would be reunited, and then they would face the final test together. But Jake was already thinking about the choice he would have to make. Could he condemn himself to eternal loneliness to save humanity's future among the stars? And, more importantly, was there a way to change the rules of the test itself? As the walls of the chamber shifted and reformed, Jake heard footsteps approaching. His team was coming back together, and the final test was about to begin. Jake heard the footsteps getting closer to where he waited in the chamber. First came Kate, her military uniform torn but her eyes bright with victory. Then Ben appeared looking exhausted but satisfied. Lisa walked in next carrying papers covered with her strange mathematical equations. Finally, Tony stumbled through the doorway, his hands still shaking from his work with the communication systems. "Jake!" Lisa called out, rushing toward him. "We thought you were dead. The Watchers showed us images of you failing your test." "I saw the same things about all of you," Jake replied, embracing his team. "But I could feel you were still alive. I could sense you fighting." Kate looked around the reformed chamber. "What happened to us? Those trials felt completely real." "They were real," Jake said. "The Watchers tested each of us individually, but we passed because we stayed connected even when we were separated." The Watcher appeared before them again, its tall form materializing from the glowing walls. This time, all 5 humans could see and hear it clearly. "You have completed the individual trials," the Watcher announced. "Your species has shown unusual abilities. You succeeded not through superior logic or technology, but through cooperation and emotion." "Is that a problem?" Tony asked. unexpected. Every other species we have tested focused on individual achievement. They tried to win through pure mental power. Your team succeeded by maintaining connections to each other and making decisions based on compassion rather than logic alone. Ben stepped forward. You say that like it's a bad thing. It is not bad or good. It is simply different. However, one test remains. The test that has defeated every species before you. The chamber around them changed once more. Now they stood on a platform surrounded by stars. Images of human colonies across the galaxy appeared in the space around them, showing all the places humanity had settled. The final test is simple, the Watcher continued. One member of your team must remain here forever as guardian of this facility. They will be cut off from all human contact, living alone for eternity to ensure the testing system continues to function. In exchange, your species will be granted freedom to expand across the galaxy without restriction. Jake's team looked at each other in horror. That's not a test, Kate said angrily. That's just cruelty. Every species before you has faced this same choice. Their representatives always chose to return home rather than accept eternal isolation. When they made that choice, their species was confined to their home world forever. Lisa was studying the mathematical displays that showed how the testing system worked. This is wrong, she said suddenly. What do you mean? The Watcher asked. Your whole system is wrong. You're not testing species to see if they deserve to join galactic civilization. You're just torturing them. The Watcher's expression didn't change, but its voice became colder. We have observed galactic civilizations for millions of years. We have seen countless species rise and fall. The tests are necessary to ensure that only worthy species advance. Worthy according to who? Ben demanded. You? What makes you the judges of everyone else? For the first time, the Watcher seemed uncertain. We are the oldest surviving species. We have the responsibility to guide others. Or maybe you're just lonely, Jake said quietly. The words hung in the air like a challenge. The Watcher turned its large black eyes toward Jake. Explain. You said you've been doing this for millions of years. You said no species has ever passed your final test. That means you've been alone all this time, haven't you? The chamber around them began to shift and change. Instead of the sterile testing facility, they now saw images of a beautiful planet with cities built by the Watcher's own species. We were the first to achieve interstellar travel, the Watcher said, and for the first time its voice contained emotion. We explored the galaxy and found it empty. We waited for millions of years for other species to join us among the stars. More images appeared, the rise and fall of countless civilizations, all of them tested by the Watchers and all of them failing the final test. But none were worthy, the Watcher continued. None could make the ultimate sacrifice. Because the sacrifice is wrong, Lisa exclaimed. You're not testing for worthiness. You're testing to make sure you stay in control. Jake stepped closer to the Watcher. How many of your own people are left? I am the last, the Watcher admitted. The others chose to end their existence rather than continue waiting alone. Then you're not testing other species to see if they're worthy, Jake said. You're testing them to see if they'll keep you company in your isolation. The truth of Jake's words seemed to hit the Watcher like a physical blow. The ancient being's form wavered and became less solid. Every species that failed your test could have been your companions, Tony added. But you kept them trapped on their homeworlds because they wouldn't abandon their own people to join you. Kate crossed her arms. You've been alone for millions of years because you set up a test that no one should pass. The Watcher looked at each of the humans in turn. Then what would you do? How would you change the system? Jake exchanged glances with his team. This was the moment that would determine humanity's future, and maybe the future of every species in the galaxy. We change the rules, Jake said. Instead of one person staying behind to maintain your system, we create a new system, one based on cooperation instead of isolation. Impossible. The testing facility requires a permanent guardian. Maybe the old testing facility does, Lisa said, pulling out her equations. But I've been working on something better, a system that doesn't require anyone to sacrifice their connections to others. She showed her mathematical work to the Watcher. What if instead of testing species in isolation, we tested them by how well they work together? What if the test was about building galactic civilization instead of proving individual worth? Ben nodded. And what if the Watchers didn't have to be alone anymore? What if they became teachers and guides instead of judges? The Watcher stared at Lisa's equations. This would change everything we have built over millions of years. Sometimes change is exactly what's needed, Tony said. That's something humans learned a long time ago. Jake took a deep breath. I'll make you a deal. I'll stay here and help you rebuild the system, not as a prisoner or guardian, but as a partner. And when it's finished, I'll go home to my own people. But the new system will bring species together instead of keeping them apart. And you would do this? You would give up months or years of your life to help redesign everything? He won't be doing it alone, Kate said firmly. We're a team. We all stay and help, or none of us do. The Watcher seemed stunned by this response. No other species has ever offered to work together on the testing system itself. That's because no other species is human, Jake said with a smile. The ancient being was quiet for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was filled with something that sounded like hope. Very well. We will try your approach. We will work together to create a new way of bringing species into galactic civilization. The testing facility around them began to transform. The cold, sterile chambers became warmer and more welcoming. The threatening atmosphere disappeared, replaced by something that felt more like a school than a prison. Jake heard new footsteps approaching across the transformed landscape. But these weren't the measured steps of his team or the ethereal movement of the Watcher. These were the soft, ancient footsteps of other Watchers, beings who had thought they were the last of their kind, but were now emerging from hiding to see what the humans had accomplished. As Jake watched more Watchers approach, he realized that humanity had done something unprecedented. They hadn't just passed the test. They had changed the nature of testing itself. The silence that had fallen over their camp on Kepler 442b had been the end of humanity's isolation in the galaxy. But more than that, it had been the end of isolation for everyone. The camp equipment flickered back to life. Communications were restored. The colony blackouts across human space ended. But Jake and his team didn't return to Earth as simple survivors. They returned as ambassadors to a galaxy that humans would help rebuild, one species at a time. The Watchers were no longer alone, and neither was humanity. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, other species felt their communication systems, returning to life, and knew that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. The age of isolation was ending, and the age of cooperation had begun. Jake Morrison stood outside his tent and looked at the strange purple sky of Kepler 442b. The two moons hung low on the horizon, casting weird shadows across the alien landscape. He had been on this planet for 3 months now, leading a small team of human researchers who were studying the ancient ruins scattered across the valley. The ruins were unlike anything humans had ever found before. Massive stone structures covered in symbols that no one could read. Some buildings reached high into the sky, while others seemed to burrow deep underground. The team's best guess was that whoever built this place had been gone for millions of years. Jake walked back toward the center of their base camp. 5 large tents were arranged in a circle around their equipment. Dr. Lisa Grant was sitting near the main structure, carefully copying symbols into her notebook. Her blonde hair was tied back in a ponytail, and her clothes were dusty from crawling through the ruins all day. "Find anything new today?" Jake asked her. Lisa looked up from her work. "These symbols are driving me crazy, Commander. They look almost familiar sometimes, but then I realize I've never seen anything like them before." Nearby, Tony Rodriguez was checking the communication equipment. His dark hair was messy, and he had that focused look he always got when working with electronics. Kate Sullivan was cleaning her rifle by the supply tent. As their security chief, she made sure to keep her weapon in perfect condition. Her red hair caught the last light from the alien sun. Ben Carter emerged from his medical tent, carrying a small scanner. He was humming an old song from Earth, something his grandmother used to sing. The medic always seemed cheerful, even in this strange place so far from home. "How's everyone feeling?" Ben asked, running his scanner over each team. "Member, no headaches or strange dreams? Just the usual nightmares about alien food," Tony joked, making the others smile. Jake was about to respond when his personal scanner started beeping in an odd pattern. The device was supposed to monitor the area around their camp for any changes. It had been running the same steady rhythm for months, but now the beeping was faster and more urgent. "That's weird," Jake muttered, looking at the small screen. The readings showed energy spikes coming from the ruins. Lisa heard the different sound and came over quickly. "What's wrong with your scanner?" "I don't know. It's picking up some kind of activity from the main structure." They all gathered around. Jake's scanner. The device showed waves of energy pulsing out from the largest ruin, the one they called the Central Tower. The energy readings were getting stronger every few minutes. "Should we go check it out?" Kate asked, her hand automatically, moving to her weapon. Jake was about to say yes when Tony's voice cut through the evening air. "Commander, something's wrong with the communications." Tony was frantically pressing buttons on his control panel, but the screens were flickering and showing error messages. "I was talking to the orbital station just 5 minutes ago. Now I can't reach anyone." Jake felt a cold worry growing in his chest. They depended on regular contact with the ship orbiting above them. If something happened to the communication system, they could be stranded on this planet with no way to call for help. "Try the backup system," Jake ordered. Tony's hands moved quickly over different controls. "The backup is dead too, and the emergency transmitter isn't responding." One by one, their electronic devices began to fail. Lisa's scanner went silent. Ben's medical equipment stopped working. Even their simple tools seemed to be affected by whatever was happening. The camp fell into an unnatural quiet. Without the constant hum of their machines, they could hear sounds they had never noticed before. The wind moving through the ruins made a low whistling noise. Small animals called to each other in the distance. But there was something else, too. A deep, steady humming that seemed to come from underground. "Do you hear that?" Lisa whispered. They all stopped moving and listened. Carefully. The humming was barely audible, like the sound of a giant machine running far below their feet. It had a rhythm to it, almost like a heartbeat. "How long has that been going on?" Ben asked quietly. "I don't know." Jake admitted. Maybe we never noticed it before because of all our equipment noise. As the alien sun set completely, something even stranger began to happen. The ruins started to glow. It began as just a faint shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. But quickly the glow became brighter and more obvious. "The structures are lighting up," Kate said, her voice full of amazement. The central tower was glowing brightest of all. Blue light pulsed through the ancient stone like blood through veins. Other buildings began to show their own lights, some green, some white, some colors that didn't seem quite right to human eyes. Jake had studied these ruins for months without seeing any sign of active technology. The structures had seemed completely dead, just old stone and metal left behind by a vanished civilization. But now they looked alive, as if something had awakened them. "This isn't natural," Kate said firmly. "Someone or something is doing this to us." Tony tried the communication equipment one more time, but nothing worked. "All our systems are completely dead, Commander. Whatever is causing this, it's targeted our technology specifically." Lisa was staring at the glowing ruins with fascination and fear. "What if our presence here triggered some kind of automated system? What if the ruins have been waiting for visitors?" "Waiting for 3 million years?" Ben asked skeptically. "Why not? We found plenty of evidence that this civilization was incredibly advanced. Maybe they built systems that could last that long." The humming from underground grew slightly louder, and the lights in the ruins pulsed faster. Jake realized they were witnessing something that no human had ever seen before. The question was whether it was wonderful or dangerous. "Everyone gather your essential supplies," Jake ordered. "We stay together tonight. No one goes anywhere alone." His team moved quickly to collect water, food, medical supplies, and weapons. Without their heating units, the temperature was already dropping as night fell. They would have to rely on emergency blankets and body heat to stay warm. As they huddled together in the center of camp, Jake kept watching the light show in the ruins. The ancient structures seemed to be communicating with each other, sending pulses of light back and forth across the valley. "Commander," Tony said quietly, "what if whoever built those ruins is still here?" Jake didn't have an answer, but as he watched the lights dance across the alien landscape, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being observed. Something was out there in the glowing ruins, and it knew exactly where they were. Jake Morrison sat in what had once been the cold testing chamber, but now looked more like a comfortable meeting room. The walls showed images of stars and planets, and soft light came from panels that seemed to respond to their thoughts. 3 weeks had passed since they had convinced the Watchers to change their ancient system. Lisa Grant was working at a table covered with papers and alien devices. She had been collaborating with the Watchers to design the new testing protocols. Instead of isolating species and forcing them to compete, the new system would bring different civilizations together to solve problems as a team. "The mathematics are actually working," Lisa said, looking up from her calculations. "We can create scenarios where multiple species work together instead of against each other." Tony Rodriguez was nearby, connecting human communication equipment with Watcher technology. The combination was producing something neither species could have built alone. A system that could translate not just languages, but entire ways of thinking. "I'm getting responses from 17 different civilizations," Tony reported. "Some of them have been waiting centuries to hear from someone else in the galaxy." Kate Sullivan stood by the window, watching as more Watchers emerged from hidden places throughout the facility. The ancient beings had been hiding alone for so long that many had forgotten how to interact with others. But slowly, they were learning to work together again. "It's strange seeing them like this," Kate said. "A few weeks ago, they seemed so powerful and mysterious. Now they just look lonely." Ben Carter was in another part of the facility working with Watcher medical technology to help heal some of the beings who had been damaged by millions of years of isolation. Many of the ancient creatures had physical and mental problems from being alone for so long. Their biology is different from ours, but loneliness affects everyone the same way, Ben had explained earlier. They need social contact just like humans do. Jake walked over to where the original Watcher, the one they had first met, was studying Lisa's new designs. The ancient beings seemed different now. Less cold and distant, more curious and hopeful. "Your species continues to surprise us," the Watcher said to Jake. "We expected you to demand immediate passage back to Earth once the communications were restored." "Our mission isn't finished yet," Jake replied. "We came here to study ancient civilizations. Turns out, we found something much more important, a chance to help build the future." The Watcher's large black eyes seemed to show emotion now, something Jake hadn't seen before. "We have been alone for so long that we forgot what it felt like to have purpose beyond mere survival." Through the facility's new communication system, they could hear messages from human colonies across the galaxy. The mysterious blackouts that had affected all human settlements were over, and people were eager to know what had happened. Jake knew they would have to return to Earth soon to make their report. But first, they needed to make sure the new system was working properly. The first test would be with a species called the Helix, who had been trapped on their home world for over 2,000 years. "The Helix are ready for their evaluation," another Watcher announced as it entered the room. This one looked different from the original, shorter and with blue-green skin instead of pale blue. "Are we ready for them?" Jake asked Lisa. "The new testing scenario is loaded into the system," Lisa confirmed. "Instead of individual trials, we'll present them with a problem that requires cooperation between their team and a team from another species." "Which other species?" Kate asked. "Humans," the original Watcher said. "You 5 will represent your species in this first cooperative test." Jake felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This would be the first time the new system was actually used. If it worked, it could change the future of galactic civilization. If it failed, billions of beings might remain trapped on their home worlds. "What's the test scenario?" Tony asked. Lisa pulled up a display showing a solar system with multiple planets. "There's a star that's about to go supernova, threatening several inhabited worlds. The Helix team and our team have to work together to evacuate the populations and find new homes for them." "That sounds incredibly complex," Ben said as he joined them. "It is," Lisa agreed. "But it's the kind of problem that actually exists in the galaxy. The old tests were artificial puzzles. The new tests are based on real situations that civilizations have to deal with." The room around them began to change as the testing scenario activated. Instead of the comfortable meeting room, they now found themselves on the command bridge of a space station orbiting the dying star. 5 new beings materialized nearby, the Helix team. They looked somewhat like humans, but taller and thinner, with skin that shifted between different shades of green. Their leader stepped forward and spoke in a melodic voice that the translation system converted to English. "Greetings, humans. We are honored to work with you in this evaluation." Jake stepped forward and extended his hand in the human greeting gesture. The Helix leader looked confused for a moment, then reached out and grasped Jake's hand. "We're honored to work with you too," Jake said. "I'm Jake Morrison, and this is my team." As the two groups introduced themselves, Jake noticed something important. Unlike the old system where teams were isolated and competing, both groups immediately began sharing information and resources. "Our scientists have calculated that we have 72 hours before the star explodes," the Helix leader, who called herself Melody, explained. "But there are 14 billion people on the planets in this system. That's not enough time to evacuate everyone using normal methods," Tony observed, studying the tactical displays. "Unless we work together," Lisa said, her mind already racing with possibilities. The next several hours flew by as both teams collaborated on the massive rescue operation. The Helix had advanced transportation technology, while the humans contributed creative problem-solving skills and experience with emergency logistics. Kate found herself working with a Helix military officer to coordinate the evacuation fleets. Ben collaborated with Helix medical personnel to set up field hospitals for refugees. Tony and Lisa worked with Helix engineers to modify their ships for maximum passenger capacity. Jake coordinated between all the groups, making sure everyone's efforts supported the overall mission. But he also noticed something else. The Helix team members were constantly checking with each other and working to support their teammates, just like humans did. "Your species values cooperation as much as ours does," Jake observed to Melody during a brief break. "Yes," she replied. "We were confused by the old tests. They seem to reward selfishness and competition, which are not virtues in our society." As the rescue operation continued, both teams found ways to save more people than either group could have managed alone. The Helix provided the advanced technology, while the humans provided innovative strategies for using that technology in unexpected ways. When the scenario finally ended successfully, with all 14 billion beings safely evacuated, both teams felt a sense of accomplishment that was completely different from the old competitive tests. The watchers who had been observing the test seemed amazed by the results. "Both species passed," one of them announced. "But more than that, they exceeded all expectations by working together." Jake smiled as he looked around at his human teammates and their new Helix colleagues. This was just the beginning. Soon, species across the galaxy would be meeting each other as partners instead of competitors. The age of isolation was truly ending, and the age of galactic cooperation had begun. Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the space station that orbited Kepler 442b. 2 months had passed since they had changed the Watcher's testing system. Through the large windows, he could see ships from dozens of different species, arriving and departing from the planet below. The ancient testing facility had been transformed into something completely new, a meeting place where civilizations could learn about each other and work together on real problems facing the galaxy. Ships that looked like crystal formations flew alongside vessels made of living metal. Some craft were so alien that Jake couldn't even figure out which end was the front. Lisa Grant approached him, carrying a tablet filled with data. Her hair was shorter now, cut for practicality after spending weeks working with alien technologies. "Jake, you need to see these numbers." She showed him the screen, which displayed a map of the galaxy with thousands of colored dots. Each dot represents a civilization that was trapped on their home world by the old testing system. In just 2 months, we've made contact with over 3,000 species. Jake whistled softly. "That's incredible. How many have chosen to participate in the new cooperative tests?" "Almost all of them. Turns out most species prefer working together to competing against each other." Who would have thought? Tony Rodriguez joined them at the window. His communication equipment had been upgraded with Watcher technology, allowing him to translate conversations between species that had never met before. Commander, I'm getting reports from all over the galaxy. Species that haven't communicated in centuries are starting to work together again. Any problems? Jake asked. A few. Some civilizations are having trouble adjusting to the idea that they don't have to compete for resources. They're so used to scarcity that abundance seems suspicious to them. Kate Sullivan walked up to their group, having just returned from a security briefing with representatives from 12 different species. Her red hair was tied back in a practical bun, and she carried a new weapon designed by combining human and alien technology. The Crimson Federation is requesting help with a border dispute, Kate reported. Apparently, they've been fighting with the Silver Collective for over 500 years about some mining rights. Now they want to try negotiating instead of fighting. That's good news, Jake said. Maybe. But both sides are so used to conflict that they don't really know how to cooperate. They're asking if some humans can help mediate their discussions. Ben. Carter appeared from around a corner, looking tired but happy. He had been working with medical teams from 40 different species to combat a plague that was affecting several star systems. Good news, everyone. We found a cure for the scorching fever. How? Lisa asked. Turns out no single species had all the knowledge needed to solve it. The Zephyrians understood the disease mechanism, the Helix had advanced biotechnology, the Crystalline Collective knew about mineral-based medicines, and we humans contributed our experience with viral mutations. Together, we created a treatment that none of us could have developed alone. Jake felt a surge of pride. This was exactly what they had hoped would happen when they convinced the Watchers to change their system. Instead of forcing species to compete, the new approach encouraged them to share their unique strengths. The original Watcher approached their group. Over the past 2 months, the ancient being had changed dramatically. It no longer moved with the cold precision of a judge. Instead, it walked like someone who was genuinely interested in learning new things. The success of the cooperative system has exceeded all our predictions, the Watcher said, but we have encountered an unexpected problem. What kind of problem? Jake asked with concern. Too much success. So many species want to participate in the new tests that we cannot process them all quickly enough. We need to expand the facility and train more evaluators. Lisa smiled. That's a good problem to have. Yes, but it requires a solution. We are requesting that each species that has successfully completed the cooperative tests provide volunteers to help evaluate other species. Would humans be willing to participate? Jake looked at his team. Over the past months, they had seen how the new system was changing the galaxy for the better. Species that had been enemies were becoming friends. Technologies were being shared freely. Problems that had seemed impossible to solve were being tackled by teams from multiple civilizations. We'd be honored to help, Jake said. Excellent. However, there is one more matter to discuss. Several species have requested that humans take a leadership role in the new Galactic Cooperative Council that is being formed. Leadership role? Kate asked. We've only been in space for a few decades. Most of these civilizations are thousands of years older than us. Age does not necessarily correlate with wisdom, the Watcher replied. Humans demonstrated the ability to see problems from new perspectives and find creative solutions. Many species believe these qualities would be valuable in a leadership position. Jake felt overwhelmed by the responsibility being offered to them. Can we have some time to think about it? Of course, but know that the decision is not yours, alone to make. Each member of your team would need to choose individually whether to accept positions on the council. After the Watcher left, Jake's team found a quiet corner to discuss the offer. "It's tempting," Tony said. "Imagine being able to help guide the development of galactic civilization." "But it would mean staying out here permanently," Ben pointed out. "We'd be giving up our lives on Earth." "Would we, though?" Lisa asked. "With the new transportation technologies, we could probably visit Earth regularly. And think about what we could learn out here." Kate was quiet for a moment before speaking. "I keep thinking about all the species that are still trapped on their home worlds, the ones we haven't contacted yet. If we can help them gain their freedom, isn't that worth some personal sacrifice?" Jake looked out the window at the bustling space traffic around the planet. Everywhere he looked, he saw beings from different worlds working together, sharing knowledge, solving problems that had plagued their civilizations for centuries. "What do you think the Watchers were really looking for all those millions of years?" Jake asked his team. "Companions," Lisa said immediately. "They were looking for other species that could join them in maintaining galactic civilization. But they were testing for the wrong qualities," Tony added. "They thought leadership meant individual sacrifice and perfect logic, when what they really needed was cooperation and creative problem-solving," Ben concluded. Kate nodded. "They needed species that could work together to make the galaxy a better place for everyone." Jake made his decision. "I'm going to accept the council position. But I want all of us to serve together, as a team." His teammates agreed without hesitation. They had started this mission as researchers studying ancient ruins. Now they were helping to build the future of galactic civilization. 2 weeks later, Jake stood in the same chamber where they had first met the Watchers. But instead of a cold testing facility, it was now a warm meeting hall filled with representatives from hundreds of different species. "The Galactic Cooperative Council is now in session," Jake announced, using the translation system that Tony had helped design. As beings from across the galaxy began discussing plans for exploration, research, and mutual aid, Jake reflected on how far they had all come. The silence that had fallen over their camp months ago had truly been the end of isolation. Not just for humanity, but for every intelligent species in the galaxy. The footsteps that had approached his tent that night had belonged to the future itself, walking toward a new age of cooperation and understanding. Jake Morrison stood at the viewport of the transport ship as Earth grew larger in the distance. After 6 months away, the blue and white planet looked more beautiful than he remembered. Beside him, his team watched their homeworld approach with mixed feelings of excitement and nervousness. "Think they'll believe our report?" Tony Rodriguez asked, adjusting the alien communication device on his wrist. The small device could translate over 4,000 different languages instantly. "The evidence speaks for itself," Lisa Grant replied, checking her tablet filled with mathematical proofs and scientific data from dozens of alien civilizations. "We have technology, art, and knowledge from species across the galaxy." Kate Sullivan looked at her new sidearm, a weapon that combined human engineering with Watcher energy technology. "I'm more worried about how Earth's governments will react to learning about the Galactic Council. Some people don't handle change very well." Ben Carter was reviewing medical files on his upgraded scanner. "At least we can offer them cures for diseases that have plagued humanity for centuries. That should help with the initial shock." The ship they were traveling in was unlike anything humans had ever built. It was a gift from the Helix, designed using technology shared by 12 different species. The hull was made from living metal that could repair itself, and the engines used principles that human scientists were still trying to understand. Captain Melody of the Helix was piloting the ship personally. She had insisted on bringing them home herself as a gesture of respect between their species. "Your Earth's defensive systems are scanning us quite thoroughly," she announced over the ship's communication system. "That's normal," Jake called back to her. "They've never seen a ship like this before." Should I respond to their hails? Jake thought for a moment. Earth's military was probably very nervous about an unknown alien vessel approaching their planet. "Let me talk to them first. They'll recognize my voice." Jake activated the ship's communication system and switched to Earth's standard frequencies. "Earth Control, this is Commander Jake Morrison. Mission Identification Alpha 779. Requesting permission to land." There was a long pause before a familiar voice responded. "Jake? Jake, is that really you? This is Control. We've been trying to reach your team for months." "It's really me, Control. We have a lot to tell you about where we've been." "Jake, what kind of ship are you flying? Our scanners show technology that's completely off the charts." Jake smiled at his teammates. "That's part of what we need to discuss. We're requesting permission to land at headquarters. We have some very important guests with us." Another pause. "Guests?" "Representatives from the Galactic Cooperative Council. Don't worry, they're friendly." The conversation that followed took nearly an hour. Earth Control had to wake up senior officials, contact government leaders, and coordinate with military commanders. Finally, they were given permission to land at the main research facility where their mission had been planned 6 months earlier. As their ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, Jake could see crowds gathering at the landing site. News of their return had spread quickly, and people were curious about the strange alien vessel. "Are you ready for this?" Jake asked Captain Melody over the intercom. "We have been preparing for first contact with your species leadership for weeks," she replied. "The Council is very interested in establishing formal diplomatic relations with Earth." The ship touched down gently on the landing pad. Through the viewports, Jake could see hundreds of people waiting behind security barriers. Scientists, military personnel, government officials, and news reporters all crowded together to witness this historic moment. "Remember, most of these people have never seen an alien before," Jake told his team as they prepared to disembark. "Let's take this slowly." The ship's main hatch opened with a soft hiss. Jake stepped out first, breathing Earth's familiar air for the first time in months. The gravity felt strange after spending so much time on the Watcher station, but it was good to be home. His teammates followed him down the ramp, each carrying examples of the technology and knowledge they had gathered. Behind them came Captain Melody and 2 other Helix diplomats. The crowd fell completely silent as they saw the first aliens ever to visit Earth openly. Captain Melody was tall and graceful, her green skin shifting colors slightly in Earth's sunlight. Her companions were shorter but equally impressive, wearing robes that seemed to be made from liquid starlight. Director Williams, the head of the research facility, approached the group cautiously. "Commander Morrison, it's good to have you back. We were beginning to worry when we lost contact." "A lot has happened, Director," Jake replied. "I'd like you to meet Captain Melody of the Helix. She represents the Galactic Cooperative Council." Captain Melody stepped forward and performed the human greeting gesture she had learned. "Greetings, Director Williams. We bring messages of friendship from thousands of species across the galaxy." Director Williams looked stunned as he shook her hand. This is incredible. How many species are we talking about?" "Currently, over 3,000 civilizations are participating in the Cooperative Council," Captain Melody replied. "Many more are joining every day." Over the following hours, Jake and his team gave detailed briefings to Earth's leadership. They explained about the Watchers, the ancient testing system, and how humanity had helped change it into something based on cooperation instead of competition. So you're saying that there's been a galactic civilization out there for millions of years, and they've been preventing species from expanding beyond their home systems? Asked President Chen, who had arrived by emergency transport. Not exactly preventing, Lisa explained. More like testing them to see if they were ready to join galactic society. But the tests were designed wrong, so almost everyone failed. Until humans came along, Tony added. We figured out that the real test wasn't about individual achievement. It was about working together. President Chen looked at the Helix diplomats with wonder and concern. What does this mean for Earth? Are we now part of this galactic government? Captain Melody spoke carefully. The Cooperative Council is not a government in the way you might understand it. We are more like a community of neighbors who help each other solve problems. Each species maintains its independence, Jake explained, but we share knowledge, technology, and resources when faced with challenges that affect multiple worlds. Ben stepped forward with his medical scanner. For example, we've brought cures for cancer, heart disease, and dozens of other conditions that affect humans. These treatments were developed by combining knowledge from multiple species. The excitement in the room was obvious. Earth's scientists and doctors began asking questions about the new medical technology. Engineers wanted to know about the ship's propulsion system. Military leaders asked about defensive capabilities, but Jake noticed that some officials looked worried rather than excited. What about our independence? Asked General Martinez. If we join this council, do we lose control over our own planet? Not at all, Captain Melody assured him. The council's fundamental principle is that each species develops at its own pace and makes its own choices. We offer assistance, not domination. Kate spoke up from her position near the ship. I've worked with security forces from dozens of different species. The Council doesn't have armies or weapons of conquest. They have engineers and doctors and teachers. The whole point is cooperation, not control, Jake emphasized. Humans helped design the current system. We made sure it protects the rights of every species. President Chen was quiet for a long moment, considering everything they had told him. This is the biggest decision in human history. We need time to discuss this with our people. Of course, Captain Melody said. The Council has waited millions of years for species to be ready. We can certainly wait while Earth makes its decision. As the initial briefings concluded and the crowds began to disperse, Jake found himself standing alone with his teammates, near their extraordinary ship. Do you think Earth will join the Council? Ben asked. Eventually, Jake replied, looking up at the stars that were becoming visible in the evening sky. It might take time for people to adjust to the idea, but humans have always been explorers. Once they realize what's out there waiting for us, they'll want to be part of it. Lisa smiled as she watched technicians carefully examining the ship's hull. Besides, we've already proven that humans and aliens can work together. This is just the beginning. Tony activated his alien communication device and listened to messages from across the galaxy. 3 more species joined the Council today, and there's a request for human mediators to help resolve a trade dispute in the Andromeda sector. Looks like we'll be busy, Kate observed. Jake nodded, feeling a deep satisfaction. They had started this mission as researchers studying ancient ruins. Now they were ambassadors helping to build bridges between civilizations across the galaxy. The silence that had fallen over their camp on Kepler 442b had indeed marked the end of humanity's isolation in the universe.